Good afternoon. We are excited to welcome everyone to today's events, a community conversations, a look inside the Virginia G. Piper House. Before we get started, we wanted to remind you that we are in a Zoom webinar. No cameras are needed. Please share your questions with everyone in the Q&A. We will address questions throughout the session if time allows. If time is short, we will address the questions after the event. They will be addressed by Shannon and Evan. Thank you for coming, and I will now pass the presentation to Jennifer Duvernay, Associate Librarian for Communications and Web Services, for our welcome and to share the ASU Library Indigenous Land Acknowledgement.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. As Patty said, my name is Jennifer Duvernay. I'm the Associate University Librarian for Communications and Web Services, and I'm honored to introduce this community conversation. First, we'd like to share the library's Indigenous Land Statement. The ASU Library acknowledges the 23 Native nations that have inhabited this land for centuries. Arizona State University's 4 campuses are located in the Salt River Valley on the ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples, including the Acamel-Otham and Peepash Indian communities, whose care and keeping of these lands enables us to be here today. ASU Library acknowledges the sovereignty of these nations and seeks to foster an environment of success and possibility for all Native American learners and knowledge seekers. We are advocates for the incorporation of Indigenous knowledge systems and research methodologies within contemporary library practice. ASU Library welcomes members of the Acamel-Otham, Peepash, and all Native nations to the library. We would like to extend a welcome to all scholars, learners, and community members to the library and to this event. And now I'd like to introduce our panelists. We're thrilled to introduce our fantastic panelists today. I'm going to share some abbreviated biographical information about them, and we will post their full bios in the chat. First, we have Grady Gammage Jr., who is a founding partner at Gammage and Burnham and a longtime leader in Arizona public policy, known for his work in real estate, land use, and water. He teaches at Arizona State University and serves as a senior fellow at the Morrison Institute and the Kyle Center for Water Policy. Alberto Ríos, Arizona's inaugural poet laureate and a recent chancellor of the Academy of American Poets, is the author of 12 collections of poetry, most recently, Every Sound is Not a Wolf. Ríos is also a Regents Professor, Virginia G. Piper Chair in Creative Writing, and the Catherine Turner Chair in English. In 2017, he was named director of the Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing. Evan Senat joined ASU in 2023 and currently serves as Associate Operations Coordinator for the Piper Writers House. Through primary research and collaboration with ASU Library's University Archives, she developed a tour of the historic house, which she now presents once a month when school is in session. And Shannon Walker, ASU Library's University Archivist. By cultivating and maintaining relationships with departments on campus, as well as with students, faculty, alumni, and the broader ASU community, Shannon's work documents the history and stories of Arizona State University. Welcome to you all to our conversation.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you for those introductions. So, hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to talk about the history of the President's House. This has been a project many months in process, with a lot of coordination, a lot of thought, a lot of deliberation. We want to just make a great conversation today. So originally, this project developed out of an inquiry that Evan Senat made about the house. She sent us an email asking for information about the history of the house. And from there, that's sort of how this project developed. Evan, do you want to tell us a little more about yourself and about that original, the seed of the project?
Sure. Thank you, Shannon. Sorry, I was muted. Okay. Thank you, Shannon. I started working at the Piper House in 2023, and part of my role was to open the house to the campus and the surrounding community after a hiatus during the pandemic. So, since my background is in anthropological research, I was very excited to create a tour of this historic house. The first step was my research was to book an archival appointment at Hayden Library. It was really easy to make my free appointment on the library website for the Wurzburger room, where I actually got to sit down with Shannon Walker and discuss the goals of my project. I gained access to Catherine Gammage's biography, President Grady Gammage's biography, and other historical logs and photos about the planning and construction of Gammage Auditorium. I also reached out to Grady Gammage Jr., who graciously agreed to an interview and walk through the house. Hi, Shannon. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm on now. I'm talking to myself a little bit. So, great. So one thing I wanted to bring up, and what we're going to do now is I'm going to do a quick overview of the history of the house, so everyone gets an idea of its various lives over the years. And then we're going to highlight the eras that our speakers represent, essentially. But one of the things I want to talk about was, as Evan and as we were doing this research, one of the challenges of the research was the many lives of the house. And so it wasn't a straightforward search for the president's house to locate materials. I also had to think about the term president's home. Some of the things were cataloged under that. President's cottage, university house, president's office. For a while, it was the Alumni House. It became University Archives. It became the University Archives building. And now it's in its iteration as the Piper Center or the Piper Writer Center. There's, again, many more names, Virginia G. Piper Writer Center. So this house has had many lives, as it has had many names, which presents a challenge, but also, makes the research all the more rich for that. So I'm going to start with, we're going to go back to when the house was built. This is around, it was built in 1907. This photo is roughly that era, maybe the early 19 teens. And you can see the structure of the house is pretty similar to the way it is now. Someone had to point this out to me, but there is a little dog on the patio that I didn't see originally. It's a very small dog, sort of a dog with patches or spots on it. You can see it in the sort of the center. But that just reminds me there are people living there, right? There's a life there going on in the house. The cost of the house when it was built was about $6,000. And it was built by the same architect that built the Peterson House, which is a historic house in Tempe. So from 1907 to 1930, it was the home of President A.J. Matthews and President Ralph Sweatman. We know during this time that graduation was also held on the lawn behind the house. And in the 1930s, they did do a remodel of the home, adding a refrigerator and probably some early form of air conditioning-ish, and new bathrooms and things like that. So updating plumbing and things. One of the notes that I did find that I thought was interesting, it said that each year during this time, the president and family had to contend with bees and noise, which I think, if I understand right, those may still be problems. So again, here's another picture of the same house it's like a side view around 1920s. And again, what's interesting, I think, to us, probably as a modern audience, is a view from a dirt road that was adjacent to the house, and then just so many trees and foliage around there, almost hiding the house, right? You can't really even see it, but providing shade during a time when, we didn't have the modern conveniences we do now. I also want to just highlight an aerial view of campus around that time, and just recognizing that there weren't a whole lot of buildings right? We picture the campus the same way we do now, right? We just spread out all over so many buildings. We don't even know where they are, what all their names are. But at this time, the campus was very small, right? It was Old Main. It was the science building. It was President's House is in the bottom center of the photos, again, surrounded by the trees. And then various other buildings around on campus, still some homes, some farms, and the road that you see on the right is what would become University Avenue. Yeah, University Boulevard right there, which we know now is right in front of the Fulton Center and things like that. So I think just getting perspective of what it was like during that time before 1930s is really important to look at that aerial view. Then we enter again, here's a picture too of this is the earliest commencement photo we have of 1928, showing the students sitting in their gowns, sitting there in front of some kind of handmade stage, with a corner of a building in the back left. And that may be the President's House, maybe the science building, what was known as the science building. Not sure, but it's in that lawn right there that kind of connects them all. Again, lots of trees, which probably was very nice because it was probably very hot in May or June or so, 1928. The next era is, of course, the Gammage era, the Grady Gammage, President Grady Gammage era, which we'll hear more about in a little bit. But I love this photo of President Gammage and his wife entertaining the Spurs, which was a women's honorary student organization, at their home, feeding them and welcoming them in their home. We know that in the 1930s, 1937, there was a WPA project to enclose the porch with the casement windows, which is great. It helps us sort of date the photos when we're looking at them. I'm sure it was nice for the family. Again, we'll probably hear more about that later. At this time when a formal refrigeration system was installed in the 1950s, 1951, and air conditioning in 57. So, and we know that probably famous people visited the house. And again, hopefully Grady Gammage Jr. will be able to enlighten us on that, what that was like. Again, an aerial view of campus. You can see the campus growing a little bit. This is in the 1950s. The President's House is going to be sort of in that bottom left corner. You can see Old Main kind of prominently, and things are growing around the house and around the campus. Still not quite what we experience today, but you can see that things are growing, maturing around, and the house is getting has a smaller profile on campus, I think. We also have great pictures of the groundbreaking for Gammage Auditorium, sort of across campus. And there is Grady Gammage Jr. in his suit as a young man and doing the groundbreaking, because unfortunately his father passed away before he was able to experience this part. So, and of course we all know and love the Gammage Auditorium. And we did do another conversation about that. So if you're interested in more of that history, we have a recording of a conversation about the history of that. And then this is a photo that Evan really wanted me to include here. Is this photo of Grady Gammage Jr. sleeping, but the official photo is of Catherine Gammage receiving an award on behalf of her husband. So, and then we have a quote here from the biography of Grady Gammage, sort of summing up his tenure as president.
So Shannon, I'm just showing you, this is the award that is in that photo. I had no idea you were going to show that photo. This sits on the desk in my house.
Excellent.
It was called the Diamond of Distinction for the 75th anniversary of ASU in 1960. And it's an Apache tear, which is obsidian, carved like a diamond and then etched around it. And I don't know how many of these were given out that year. I was too asleep to remember, obviously, but I still have it, and it's still on my desk. And it is in a box made out of, I believe, out of ironwood, Arizona ironwood.
Oh, wow. Look at that. We did not plan that. That came together perfectly. History meeting and intersecting like that. So thank you for sharing that. So, and again, we look forward to be hearing more about your personal experiences with the house. I'll just sort of wrap up the history of it, but we did want to talk about the legacy of Grady Gammage. He was president, one of the longest serving presidents of the school, if not the longest. But this quote sort of summed up that tenure, and he said that the Grady Gammage dreamed grandly, persuaded effectively, and never stopped striving until he had brought his dreams to reality, which obviously created a foundation for what the school is now, right? For a while, the school was known as the Alumni House. This was in 1960 when the incoming president, President Durham, decided not to live in the house on campus and decided to live near campus, as I understand. At that time, the house was remodeled, converted into an administrative building, and renamed the Alumni House. And it served just as a headquarters for alumni operations, offices, meeting space for staff, students, and faculty. And I think they enjoyed a high-profile, kind of recognizable location on campus, which is super important to that connection with the alumni. Other pictures. I really like the picture. I like both pictures, but I like the picture on the right where you can see a mountain in the background there. I think the view is a little more obscured now, but we enjoyed that at that moment. And then again, another aerial view of that era in the 1960s. I like this one, first of all, because it's a color view, a color aerial view, which we don't see a lot of. But again, on the lawn, alumni lawn in front of Old Main, so many more trees than there are now. But there are less trees around the president's house, but still that nice big lawn, and again, more growth in the buildings behind, more what would be south of the president's house. You see the campus just really growing up around it. Then in the 1970s, it became University Archives, became the official home for University Archives, and then Alfred Thomas Jr. was appointed the University Archivist. Before that time, he had been the registrar and director of admissions for the school, and then in his sort of second life became the University Archivist. At this time, around this time, 1985, the house was officially listed on the National Register of Historic Places, which is good in many ways, can be challenging in other ways when you're trying to fix the house. We can talk about that later, but around the 1980s, the University Archive started to outgrow the house and really sought opportunities to move other places. And then eventually in 1995, University Archives moved to Hayden Library. Then in 2004, we're pictured University Archives, 2004 is when the house was remodeled and became the Virginia G. Piper Writers Center. It was, of course, renovated, and the quote I have here, and I'm not quite sure where it came from, was to restore the home to its original early 20th century grandeur. Again, I think recognizing that it was a historic home and kind of restoring it back to that history. And we'll hear a lot more about that, I'm sure, from Dr. Rios. So that is the history of the Piper Writers Center now. And the President's Home, President's Cottage, all of the names and many lives that it's have. In a nutshell, I know it's very brief, and again, we could elaborate on any of those eras or times, but I think today we want to really highlight the speakers that we have and talk about their experiences with the house, and I just want to hear from them. So thank you for listening. I think Evan's going to start with some questions for everyone, or for our guest speakers. So.
Yes, so my first section of questions is for Grady Gammage, so feel free to unmute Grady. Thanks for being here today. So my first question for you, can you tell us what life was like for you as a young boy growing up on a college campus, and did you have playmates with you or visit you on campus?
Sure. So I was the much indulged / spoiled only child of older parents. My father was 59 years old when I was born. My mother was considerably younger, but nevertheless, I didn't have the sort of parents most kids have. They felt like a different generation, particularly my father. And it could have been a very isolated childhood, but as the pictures you show demonstrate, it was a very different campus in those days. So most of what was so across Palm Walk and across to the south were men's dormitories, but a little bit farther to the east were neighborhoods, neighborhoods of small bungalows, many of which were occupied by faculty members, where all those big engineering buildings are, the ISTB 1 through 12. I don't know what number we're up to on ISTB, interdisciplinary science and technology buildings, what number we're at. All the buildings, which are now the Honors College and the dorm, all of that area were small bungalow houses. And a lot of my friends lived there. I went to grade school on the ASU campus on a building that was known as the Ira D. Payne Training School. That's where the School of Music is now. And so my friends and I all went to school like near this house, and they all lived pretty near the house. Having said that, none of them had a two-story house. That was a big deal in Arizona in the 1950s. In Arizona in the 50s, we built one-story houses. Two-story houses were sort of, ooh, that's back east. That's how they built houses. And this is very much a back east kind of house. You referred to it as restoring the grandeur. It's not really a grand house. It's like the house the colonel would have on an army base. It's an okay house, and it was bigger than most of my friends' houses because it was 2 stories. And we would sled on the stairwell. You took the welcome mat from the front of the house, you took it up the first flight to the landing, and slid down it into the first floor. And that was, my friends would come and we would sled in the house. And because it had that big lawn, my friends came over all the time. We liked to play there. I told the story before. I had a tree house. There was a giant mulberry tree right where that diagonal walk goes from the house kind of over past Old Main and the University Club. And my friends and I collected a bunch of boards from building sites on campus and started building a tree fort in the mulberry tree. And my father came out and said, you know, we really can't have a tree fort like this in the middle of campus. It doesn't look great. Let me have the campus maintenance crew build you a tree house. Okay. So they came and they built me a treehouse that was, frankly, a work of art. It was mitered corners and peg and dowel put together, and it floated. It looked like something from the Lord of the Rings, you know, when they go to Lothlorien and they climb into the trees with they call them flets that are platforms in the trees. And it was gorgeous, and I really didn't care for it. I wanted my own crappy treehouse with bent nails and warped boards that would fall apart if somebody climbed in it. But nevertheless, I had a treehouse, and that was a huge attraction for friends. So I had kids and friends around all the time. It was an unusual childhood, and there were students in and out of the house all the time. And I would go to the men's dorms nearby and play ping pong or pool on the porches with the male students. And I was kind of the universal mascot. Everybody treated me like royalty. It was great. I loved every minute of it. So.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question. We know from records that some very famous visitors came to the house to meet with your parents. Can you tell us about what would be your most memorable visit?
So there were lots of interesting visitors. I can reel off a bunch of names that may or may not mean anything to people watching this. An actor named Vincent Price, who did a lot of sort of grade B horror movies in the 1950s and 60s. Wonderful movie that Tito has probably seen called The Baron of Arizona. That is worth, if you can find it, worth getting. It is cheesy and bizarre, but it's a true story about the biggest land swindler in the history of Arizona, which is a title of some distinction. And Lady Astor came to visit. Edward Teller, the father of the H-bomb, came to visit. The one that I remember that Evan knows that I've told her about before is when Ronald Reagan came. This is before he was governor of California. He came to ASU to dedicate a mainframe computer that was given by General Electric to ASU. It was the second mainframe computer on a university campus in America. The first one was at MIT. And it was given to ASU because GE was building the plant in which they would make mainframe computers on the Black Canyon Highway in North Phoenix. So Reagan was a spokesman for General Electric at the time. So he came to dedicate this computer. And we had a luncheon for him on the lawn to the east of the house. And I happened to be sitting across from him. And I'm like 6 years old. And all I knew was this was another grade B actor. We seemed to have a draw for grade B actors, which is what Reagan was in those days. And he seemed to keep taking his eyeballs out, which just fascinated me. I remember staring at him. Well, it was contact lenses. In 1956, nobody wore contact lenses. They were new, they were experimental. I think they were made out of glass or some kind of very hard substance. They didn't breathe. He was an actor, so he had these at an early stage in the history of contact lenses, and he'd never been anywhere as dry as Phoenix, and he couldn't keep them moist. So he kept taking them out. And I remember this man taking this thing out of his eye, and it seemed to me to be big. I think they were also larger in those days, and putting it in his hand and showing it to me. And I'm like, wow, this is really weird. And he goes on to become president. So that's the story I remember the best.
That is very memorable. Thank you for sharing that. My next question is involving your father. As we all know, he was a very involved president, guiding the school through both World War II and the Great Depression, as well as advocating for Tempe Normal Teachers College to become Arizona State Teachers College, and then eventually Arizona State University in 1958. But for you, how do you remember your father's presence on this campus and within this house?
So what I remember most vividly is walking around campus with him. He was very involved in all the buildings as they were being built, and that was the late 50s were a time of a lot of construction. And he would talk to me about the buildings. I think that is part of why I developed such an interest in architecture, real estate construction, and historic preservation kinds of issues. But he would also talk to me about the trees. He was really into the trees on campus. He knew the names of them all, and I kind of do too. I really like landscapes and trees. But as we would walk around campus, this is, I think, a significant difference from that time to this time. He knew most of the students. I mean, when he died in 59, ASU had something like 15, 16,000 students. So that was beyond who he would know, but there were lots and lots of students he knew. When he started at ASU, it had less than 1,000 students, I think. And he would talk to the students. And I can remember him loaning money to students that they would say, President Gammage, I really can't get through the week. And he'd give them $20 or $10 or whatever. I don't know. It was a very personal relationship between him and the student body. Not only was it a smaller school, but it was a different kind of school in those days. It was nothing like the research machine that ASU is today. It didn't have those sources of federal grants and lots of activities that require Michael Crow or any president of a university today to spend most of the time reaching outside the campus to raise money and awareness of the school. It was much more a family kind of relationship on campus.
Thank you. And then my final question is, after your father's passing, your mother, Catherine, went on to serve ASU as its first director of development for 27 years. And you became her date to all of the exclusive campus events, such as the groundbreaking ceremony here on the screen, of Gammage Auditorium in 1962. What was your fondest memory or favorite event to attend with her?
Boy, so even before my dad's death, because of the name change campaign, um, my father was somewhat constrained in his ability to overtly campaign for the name change because it was put on the ballot by initiative petition against the will of the Board of Regents, who were my father's employers. So he was running this kind of surreptitious, quiet campaign behind the scenes against the people who employed him. As a consequence of that, my mom did a lot of public speaking about the name change campaign. She and Jimmy Kreisman, who was the alumni director at the time, did most of the speaking on behalf of the proposition. 200 was the number, I think, to make ASU a university. And I went all over the state with her. There are places in the state she went to make a speech about the name change that I have never been back to since. Small towns in eastern Arizona, which were hostile territory. Those were and much of the state, Pima County and many of the small rural communities in Arizona were bastions of the University of Arizona, which was very much the enemy at the time of the name change. And so I remember going into these places, and my mother was extremely charismatic. She was a good public speaker and had a real kind of presence. And she would do these speeches, and I would watch. And that was fun. You're showing the picture of the groundbreaking. As you said, I was dragged as her date after my father's death. I had to put on my little suit and my tie and dress up and go and act like a proper little gentleman. I was very good at it. I was just disgustingly cute and adorable, I'm sure. I don't really know. And I didn't really enjoy a lot of it. The day of the groundbreaking for Gammage Auditorium, my class in school would have been sixth grade, maybe seventh grade, I don't know. We're having a swim party at a friend's house on Baseline, where the entrance to the Arizona Grand Resort, or what was the Point South Mountain is now. There were orange groves, and my friends lived in the orange groves, and they had a big swimming pool, a 25-meter pool, and everybody was there at the pool except me. I had to go and be the proper little gentleman but as soon as the groundbreaking was done, she had arranged for friends to pick me up and take me to the pool party. But to her great credit, my mom was conscious of the fact that she was making me do stuff that other little kids didn't have to do, and tried to nevertheless let me have the experience of being a little kid that I wanted to have.
Oh, thank you so much. That's wonderful to hear. And for viewers that don't know, that shovel that Grady is using for the groundbreaking ceremony is still in a case at Gammage Auditorium to this day. So just a relic at this point. That's amazing.
Yeah, it sat in a closet at my mom's house for a long time, and I finally got rid of it and gave it to the auditorium.
So now it's on display. But thank you so much, Grady. It's always fascinating to hear your stories, and I look forward to speaking with you again. For the sake of time, I'm going to move on and ask Alberto Ríos some questions. Hi, Alberto. I'm used to calling you Tito, sorry.
That's fine. That's fine.
So my first question, do you remember when ASU Humanities received the $10 million donation from the Virginia G. Piper Trust? And
Well,
follow up, how was the idea of the center conceived and brought to fruition after that?
these are good questions because they're on some level kind of mysterious. That was the largest, I think, grant to ASU ever. And it was big news. It wasn't big news about who was going to get it yet. And the machinations that went on behind the scenes were mysterious. But but the creative writing program was doing really great stuff, and one of the top programs in the country. And I had written, when I was chair of creative writing, I had written a proposal for a center or a space, and I didn't have a name for it yet or anything, but it described everything that kind of Piper became. And of course, nobody could do that. It was just going to be ridiculously expensive and so on. But I gave it to the chair, I took it to the dean, and I took it to the next chair and the next dean and the next chair and the next dean. And I was pretty persistent, but without real hope of getting the actual thing. What I think I thought was important at the time was the idea that it should exist. And then lo and behold, nobody would have believed it. But presumably President Crow, who was kind of new to campus, decided it would go to essentially creative writing. And that was a shocker. ASU, was known more primarily as a business university, and maybe more technical things like that. But President Crow, as I've spoken with him, talked about wanting to retain a kind of heart in the campus, that we needed to be everything, not just one thing, and not just whatever people might think they know us for. I think our mission, we're going to be part of making that picture whole. And the part when it was announced was really something of a shocker, but in a shocking time. You've got to remember that it was the turn of the century. 9/11 had happened. The Diamondbacks had won the World Series. It was a big time here. And so we were part of that at that point. And it was overwhelming and obviously meaningful. And it was meaningful not just to us, the writers and the English department, Greater English Department, and Liberal Arts, College of Liberal Arts, but to the campus. And we have never looked back. It was just the right thing at the right time.
Excellent. And you both were actually present for the opening of the center more than 20 years ago on February 3rd, 2005. It was there that you, Alberto, presented your poem, Gathering House, which we will hopefully get to hear at the end of this webinar. Can you describe to us what the atmosphere was like on that day?
Yeah, it was electric and mysterious, both. It was electric in that this was just big news, and people had gathered, and the house itself was mysterious. And so it was a combination of big news, opening up something, and to me it felt like somebody reading a book of poems. They're just, as I was talking to Shannon, I guess it was, she has a hard time with poetry, but it was like entering a poem, because that building, that house, was really unknown to most people on campus. It's a building you walked by. And so with everybody gathered there and delivering a poem of all things, right, on a campus on a day like that, it was an event. And I would say the word I remember for it and the feeling that we had was, it was electric. It was a big decision, and it was a big statement.
So, Tito, what I remember on that day, the dedication was mostly on the front steps, on the lawn.
Yes.
On the front steps is what I remember. And I remember several people saying to me, because I think, as you said, it was kind of mysterious. Nobody really knew what the deal was. Several people said to me, I've heard this house is haunted.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember in the remarks I made that day saying, I guess I'm the ghost. Because I'm the last person who ever lived in that house that's still alive. Now I don't really think I'm the ghost, but I kind of felt like I was the ghost that day, remembering what the house was like. I feel a little bit that way today as well. I'm sort of a ghost that was there in that house at one point.
You're still haunting it.
Yeah.
The house is listed on all of the Halloween or all of the haunted house things in Phoenix. I'm not sure they point to you, but if you know who it is, let us know.
Yeah, I think reality is, to the extent there's a ghost, I think it's Dixie Gammage, who was
Yeah.
my father's
Yeah.
first wife,
Yeah.
who became kind of an invalid in the house. I never knew Dixie Gammage existed until I came home one day, because there is a building, after all, named Dixie Gammage
Yes,
Hall that is
yes.
part of the College of Fine Arts, or whatever the College of Fine Arts is called this week. And I came home and I said to my mother, "What is this Dixie Gammage thing?" To which she responded, "Oh, I guess I should tell you the story. That was your father's first wife." I'm like, "Whoa, no idea."
Whoa.
They had had no children, and Dixie had died before my mother came to live in the house. But I think Dixie's the ghost.
Well, I think that's what we've always thought, but it's a sensitive subject.
I
Some
never
of the
saw her.
family still being
I
around and
lived
all.
there. I lived there for 8.5 years in the house. I never saw a ghost, any ghost.
Yeah. Well, it was it's been a story we've had to respond to over and over again as we've opened up the house. A lot of people, that's the only thing they know about it. And but it's fun. That speaks to the imagination. It speaks to a presence that the campus has, that it adds to the.
Well, and ASU lacks a lot of visible touch points for its history.
Yeah.
Because ASU exploded so fast, grew so fast, because it was not the land grant school. It became a big university by devouring the city of Tempe. All those little bungalows that my friends lived in, all gone because ASU took them over, and bought them or acquired them in order to grow the campus. There are not a lot of places where you feel and sense the history of the
Yeah.
university. There's Old Main, and I tell people there are the malls. Everyone needs to recognize that the malls were streets.
Yeah.
They were streets of the city of Tempe that were consumed in this growth. And there's this house, and frankly, not a lot else. And it's important to recognize and honor those places that are the touch points of our past and our history.
Yeah, Grady, one of the things I love most about the house at this point in its life is the Arizona sound that it makes when you step on the wood. That squeaking or that
Creep.
creaking, which
Yes.
you recognize it if you go around Arizona to buildings with historical presence, and I'm happy to be part of that. I love that sound.
That brings me to my next question. On that opening day, I believe there was a time capsule that was compiled and buried between the brick pavers of the back patio, which can still be seen today. The capsule is actually set to be open in 2105. None of us will get to witness that.
I expect to be there.
Okay. Do you recall when that was buried?
Oh
And
yeah,
did you
no,
contribute
yeah,
to
we
it?
were all part of that. It was a lot of fun. We just thought, we got this huge grant. We are doing something that we think is important. How do we demonstrate that in just a little capsule? And so everybody kind of contributed something different. One of the funny things I remember is one of the things that I contributed was a 50-cent piece that was 100 years old. And the idea there was that when this gets opened, right, it will expand the sensibility of time when it does get opened. And I had a lot of fun thinking about that. It was just, kind of a Latin American sense of time. But I think it'll be fun for them to find a 100-year-old, well, it'll be 200-year-old coin at that point, I guess. So it was good. 200, yeah, yeah. No, 18, what would that have been? 1805? Yeah, 1905. Oh, older.
Wow.
So anyway, that's what I remember thinking. But everybody, we all put books in. We all put, some different artifacts from the program. Some posters of what we had been doing and who was there and that sort of thing. So it was a really it was a nice photograph of us at the time.
And then my final question for you with a follow-up. In your words, what does the presence of the center and its many services provide to this campus? And how have you witnessed the center evolve over the span of 20 years?
Well, I think a word, and I kind of said it earlier, heart. That's what this place gives to us, I think, as a campus. Heart, imagination, hope, feeling. This is a focused place. It's not holy in the sense of religion and all that stuff, but it has a focused sensibility of what it's trying to do, and it's not different from science. It's not different from architecture and all of the other things that are trying something similar. But this is words, right? And so it reaches beyond what's possible in material sciences and what we can demonstrate. This is, make it up and it'll happen kind of work. But the smarts that have come out of that, the people who have written and been affected by that, I think it's crucial. It's important, especially right now when things are so chaotic. It gives us a sense that we can think our way through all of this. And that's an important way to feel.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for being here and answering our questions and regaling us with your tales. I believe, Alberto, you would like to read Gathering House for us?
That would be great. I would be happy to. This was the poem, Grady, I'm sure you memorized this and remember it well. But this is the poem I read at the dedication of the house, and I think it holds up. And I'm happy to read it once again. When you do these things for the first time, you don't know what's going to become of them. And I'm happy to be here right now and, saying these words again. So this is called Gathering House. You can read the epigraph later. Who has gathered and who shall gather yet? Who stands in this place and reads these words now? Welcome, and always welcome. Where writers have gathered, a house is made, and made better for words well thought, well said, for greens and grays, for words of ready tender, written and fair and full and fine exchange for what life has made of us. Know that you are not alone. Writers barter with the world, but for themselves, they make this common compact with each other. I have thought of you. I have remembered you. You are my story as we are yours. So welcome yet again. Stand in turn where we all have stood. This is the gathering house we have made together. Full with us and more with you now. A house with room enough, centuries with time enough to remember each of you, coming and going, gifts every one.
Yeah, that is truly amazing. Thank you so much, Alberto. It's a fantastic way to close out our time. I think there were questions that were submitted when people registered for this event. We can try to address some of them. I think were addressed in our presentations, and then some maybe haven't. I'm going to try to read through them a little bit. We talked about famous people that visited. Oh, okay, this is a good one. And this might be for Evan a little bit. Can you talk about some of the uses for the house today? Are there tours available? Is the house open on the weekends and things like that?
Okay. The house is not open on the weekends. There are tours available. The next tour scheduled is November 18th. You can go on our website and register. There's also another one on December 2nd, I believe. They're usually on Tuesdays at noon, just because we have so much programming happening within the house during the week. And the first question was, how is the house used today? Got open hours available every Wednesday for anybody on campus to visit the house. They can just be in the space. It's a quiet space, which is kind of rare to find on this busy campus. So we'll have students sometimes work on their studies in the house. We give them access to the kitchen so they can have lunch here. We also have a little library space where you can sit and play chess. Also, you're free to read any of the books in our collection. You just have to keep them in the house. And we also have other programs such as workshops available through the Piper Writers Studio. And we also host classes here occasionally. We have an English class that's here every Monday this semester, and Hayden's Fairy Review. That's a biannual journal that is edited by students, a part of the Hayden's Fairy Review class. And that is in charge of by our editor-in-chief, Susan Wynn. You can find all of this on our website. I know it's a lot of information, so just check out our website and you can find a way to visit the house or just come and see us in our many programs.
Awesome. Thank you, Evan. Another question, or a few questions, are about the preservation of the house as a historic house, and or any preservation concerns there might be for the building. I don't know much about that. Maybe Grady or Alberto, you can talk more about it. I do know that it had to go through the process of being a nationally registered house. And that was a longer process because I think the paperwork sort of bounced back because they had to either correct some things or fix some things, and then it was finally passed. So I don't know, Grady, if you guys have more information.
I can talk a little bit. I have one of my legal specialties has been historic preservation. So I know a really lot about how the system works. And it is different than most people think it is. A private property on the National Register of Historic Places has no protection whatsoever from private action. Now, this house is owned by the state of Arizona. Because it's ASU, and ASU is entirely the property of the state of Arizona. So the fact that it's on the National Register gives it a significant amount of protection. There was a time before the Piper gift and the rehabilitation of the house that I worried about the house, frankly. ASU has been so desperate for space and for bigger buildings and for doing things that I've worried in general about all of the historic buildings at ASU. Old Main was largely saved by the fact that the university's telephone switch is in the basement of Old Main. And the cost to move that would have been so significant, there was never really any thought of tearing down Old Main. I was one of the co-chairs of the campaign to try to restore Old Main. This house is really small compared to the amount of land it has on the ASU campus. And that would have, I think, put it very much at risk if it weren't for the Piper gift. And that gift restored and stabilized the house. It brought it back to that earliest period before the porch was enclosed. When I lived there, the porch was enclosed, which is weird to me because it's a glassed-in, unair-conditioned space on the south side of a building in Tempe. Really? You're going to hang out there a lot? It's going to be like 112 degrees in it all the time. And I don't remember our using the porch all that much as a result. I'm sure we did. But I think by virtue of that gift and the fact that it is now celebrated as a place that people write poems about, the house is, I think, protected and will never be threatened by the university.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so. Yeah, because hopefully we've demonstrated today what a historically significant house it is and such an important part of the ASU story. So if that's all you get from today, then it's been successful. So thank you so much to Alberto and Grady for joining us today. You added so much to our conversation. If there are other questions, you can email us. We're happy to answer those offline if we can. So thank you.
I think that's me. Huge thanks to Evan, Shannon, Grady Gammage Jr., and Alberto Rios for bringing your expertise and your enthusiasm and your memories and your talents to today's community conversation. We'd also like to thank everybody has attended today. You'll be receiving a recap email, which will include the recording and additional resources in about a week. Thank you for your time and interest and support of the ASU Library.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.